The morning they tried to take our land, sheriff's lights turned the cottonwoods red and blue, and something in me went still. Not angry, not scared, just still like the moment before you squeeze a fence staple and feel it bite the post. I was on the porch with my second cup of coffee, boots up on the railing the way my dad used to sit. The air had that clean, early bite to it. I could smell creek water and lilac and the ash from last night's burn barrel. The flag on the cedar pole, my father's flag from his last memorial, day popped in a soft breeze. That's when the HOA convoy rolled in, 2 white SUVs, a clipboard brigade, and Karen hair sprayed to high heaven. Sunglasses the size of saucers, a smile you use when you're about to say something unneighborly. "Good morning," she sang, stepping onto the gravel like it owed her rent. "We're here to address a boundary violation and unapproved structures." She nodded toward our split-rail fence, the one my grandpa and I set with a string line and a stubborn old mule, and then toward our little red barn. "Square and true since 1972. "I'm going to stop you there," I said, standing. We didn't violate anything. Before I could say more, the sheriff cruiser turned in. Same old county crest on the door. A deputy I didn't recognize. He clicked his lights off and climbed out, hand on his belt, radio crackling. He looked young, like someone's kid who should still be stocking shelves at the hardware store. "Morning," he said. "We got a call about a property dispute. I'll need to see your permits and any recent survey." "Funny," I said, keeping my voice level, because the only new thing out here is a birdhouse my daughter painted. Karen pushed her sunglasses up. "Deputy, this homeowner expanded his fence onto HOA common land. He also added a barn extension without approval, and he's been storing equipment on the berm, which is HOA property per the plat." She held out a packet of paper like a magic trick maps, highlighted lines, a letter with a lot of bold type. I didn't look at her documents. I looked at the line of iron fence posts marching along the ridge, each capped in rust. I looked at the hackberry tree where my dad carved in 1978 with his pocket knife. The year he promised my mother he'd make a home nobody could push around. The land didn't shift. We didn't move a thing. But Karen had brought the lore, at least the look of it. "Sir," the deputy said, "I'm going to need you to step over here while we review the complaint. I should tell you something about me. I'm calm by choice. My wife says I let things roll off because my shoulders are too stubborn to slump. But when they pointed at my father's flag and called my fence a trespass, I felt that stillness turn into an old, hard knot. You don't threaten a man's place and expect him to smile, deputy," I said. My grandfather poured the concrete for that corner post himself. He set the iron pin with Mr. Garcia, the county surveyor. In 1964, I've got the note he wrote in my toolbox. "The berm you're pointing at is a flood control feature my dad built after the '85 rain. The HOA wasn't even a thought back then," Karn laughed. "Stories are cute, but the HOA's plat is the law here." I could hear my wife inside whispering into the phone. A moment later, the screen door squeaked. "He's on his way," she mouthed. She didn't have to say who Grandpa doesn't hurry. At 92, he moves like a man who knows the earth won't shift without his say-so. But I swear, that morning, the gravel started crunching before I could take another breath. His green Ford rolled in quiet, no hurry at all, the VFW cap pulled down, the old leather satchel riding shotgun. He parked like he always does, dead center on that sun-bleached oil spot by the barn. He stepped out, cane tapping, satchel swinging. The deputy straightened, like he'd been caught sitting in church with his hat on. "Morning," Grandpa said to nobody and everybody. "What seems to be the trouble on McNeil land?" Karen plastered on a neighborly smile. "Sir, the HOA is trying to correct a boundary issue. We'll need these structures vacated and the fence moved. The sheriff is here to keep the peace." Grandpa blinked at her like he was deciding which tool to use. Then he looked at the deputy. "Son, you know what a patent deed looks like?" The deputy said, rubbing the back of his neck. "I've seen copies." "Good." Grandpa lifted the satchel. The leather creaked like old saddle, because I brought the original. The porch light clicked off even though it was morning. The wind paused. Even a meadowlark somewhere down by the creek stopped singing. "The thing about lines," Grandpa said, placing the satchel on the porch rail, is they mean something if you know who drew them. Karen rolled her eyes. "We don't have time for stories," Grandpa smiled, easy and warm, like he was about to hand someone a piece of peach pie. "Sure you do," he said, "because this one's about to save you from a mess you don't want to be in." That's how it started. Sirens fading. Coffee cooling. My grandfather about to pull the ground out from under the HOA without raising his voice. Grandpa set his satchel down like a judge setting a gavel. The deputy came closer. Karen hovered, pretending not to be rattled. A couple of HOA board members hung back by their SUVs. Whispering like teenagers outside a gym dance, Grandpa snapped the brass latches. Inside, everything was wrapped in wax paper, the way he wraps anything that matters. Letters from my grandmother. His discharge papers, the yellowed plat maps that smelled like a library drawer. "Deputy," Grandpa said, "you mind if I use your cruiser as a table? Can't trust this railing, it's got a memory." The young man hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, sir." Grandpa spread out a survey from 1964, hand-inked lines. Bearings and distances written in a tidy script, the corners labeled with IP for iron pin. "This here," he said, pointing, "is that oak snag on the ridge. We set the first pin there when the county swapped the creek easement. Mr. Garcia used a transit that was older than sin, but he could cite a line straighter than a preacher." Karen cleared her throat. "This is all very nostalgic. But the HOA's governing documents reference the master plat filed in 1997, after the subdivision was approved." Grandpa kept smiling. He fished out another paper. "And this," he said, "is the recorded exceptions, signed and notarized, that excluded this parcel and its flood berm from the HOA's common area because it was already part of a county. Drainage agreement. Recorded the same day the master plat was filed. You can see the clerk's stamp." The deputy leaned in. He traced the raised seal with his finger like it might burn him. "This looks official." "It is," Grandpa said, "because the men who drew it knew they were drawing more than lines. They were drawing the shape of a family's life." I watched Karen's mouth twitch. "Where did you get that?" she asked, a little too sharp. Grandpa cocked his head. "I filed it," he said. "My wife brought sandwiches to the clerk because we kept them past lunch. We were younger then," one of the board members spoke up. We never saw that exception in our binder." "Binders are only as good as the folks who put them together," Grandpa said. "Tell me, who's your management company now?" "Not the same one from 5 years back, I wager." The board member looked guilty. "No, sir. New outfit. Cheaper." "Cheaper gets expensive quick," Grandpa said, and tapped the paper. "Now, here's where it gets interesting. Your current plat, the one you brought today?" He nodded at the glossy printouts in Karen's hand. "Shows the berm shaded as common, but the meets and bounds don't match the original. Somebody pulled a digital overlay from an old GIS layer and stretched it to fit the new map. Sloppy work." The deputy looked at Karen. "Ma'am," she swallowed, "our management company provided those." Grandpa's smile didn't change. He slid another document out, a letter on agency letterhead, dated 1986, and this is the county's acknowledgement that the berm is part of flood control for the creek. It references the easement and the landowner, my boy, his daddy. That's my signature there, as witness." "Sir," the deputy said, "are you saying the HOA materials are wrong?" "I'm saying they're wishful," Grandpa answered. "And wishful turns to harmful when you try to take what isn't yours." Karen bristled. "We're not taking. We're enforcing." "This homeowner expanded his fence," Grandpa chuckled. "Honey, that fence was set when your hairspray was still on the shelf at Ben Franklin's. And if you want iron, we'll give you iron." He looked my way. "Go get the Johnson metal detector from the tool shed. The one your dad swore would outlive the tractor." Our boots found the path on their own. The shed smelled like oil and cedar shavings. I grabbed the old detector, heavy, dented, faithful, and brought it back. Grandpa nodded at the deputy. "Come walk with me." We moved along the fence line. Meadowlarks started singing again, like they were curious. Grandpa stopped where the fence turned at the hackberry tree. He motioned for me to sweep the ground. The detector hummed low, then chirped. I scraped with a spade, feeling the crunch of gravel, the give of damp soil. I brushed away earth until I found it, the top of an iron pin. Rusted but solid, right where the map said it would be, the deputy crouched. That's a corner marker. Grandpa's eyes twinkled. Yes, it is. And if you pace 46 feet east-northeast, you'll find another. We did. The detector sang again. Another iron pin. We found a third near the blackberry thicket. Each time, the metal hummed, the soil gave way. The past rose up like a truth that had been waiting patiently. Back at the porch, Karen was on her phone, voice tight. I don't care. Get me the plat our lawyer used. Email it now. Grandpa's tone stayed kind. Ma'am, may I see that letter you waved at my grandson earlier? She hesitated, then handed it over like it might bite. Grandpa read it, lips moving a little. This isn't from an attorney, he said softly. It's from your management company. And bless their hearts, they cite the wrong parcel ID. That's across the creek. Belongs to the county. If you'd pushed this, you'd have trespassed on government land. A flush crept up her neck. We were only trying to maintain standards, she snapped. That's a good thing, Grandpa said. So long as you remember the standard comes after the deed, not before it. One of the board members cleared his throat. Maybe we should. Reschedule the enforcement hearing. Maybe you should apologize, my wife said from the doorway. She wasn't loud, but it carried. You came to take what my husband's father and grandfather built. You brought a sheriff to our porch. The deputy shifted, shame sliding across his face. Ma'am, Grandpa lifted a hand. There's a right way to clean up a mess, and it starts with doing it in the open. You all like meetings? Let's have one. Tonight. Community room. Bring your binders. I'll bring the papers and the pins if you need them. Karen bristled, then exhaled. Fine. 7 o'clock. Grandpa tipped his cap. 7 o'clock it is. And bring a pot of coffee. The kind you can stand a spoon up in. We've got a little more to talk about than fence lines. On their way out, the deputy paused by me. Sir, he said, I'm sorry for the lights. I didn't know. It's all right, I told him. Most of us don't know until we learn. He nodded. The convoy left. The gravel settled. The breeze picked up the flag again. Grandpa poured my cold coffee out into the petunias and handed me his thermos instead. Tastes better, he said. It did. It tasted like something solid. Like paper, iron, and memory. The HOA community room sits behind the pool, the kind of place where birthday cakes get cut and policy gets read by people who forget the reason for both. Fluorescent lights hummed. Folding chairs squeaked. A flag stood in the corner, limp, without a window open. The room smelled like lemon cleaner and coffee that had burned an extra hour. Folks showed up, curious neighbors I waved to at the mailbox. The widower who mows his ditch on Saturdays, the young couple with the new lab puppy. Karen arrived with 2 board members and the property manager. A tall man with perfect hair and the look of someone who's never carried a post-hole digger in July. Grandpa walked in like he always does. Hat off, papers under his arm, the old satchel by his side. He nodded to the flag, then to the room. Thank you for coming, he said, his voice steady. Let's get right to it. Karen cleared her throat into the microphone. We're here regarding enforcement actions against the McNeil property for boundary encroachment and unapproved structures. Point of order, Grandpa said gently. Before you enforce, you have to be sure what's yours to enforce. A few chuckles warmed the air. The manager frowned. Sir, with respect, the HOA operates under covenants that grant us authority over common areas and visible structures. Grandpa laid the 1964 survey on the table at the front. He placed the 1986 flood control letter beside it. Then the 1997 exception with the raised seal. The papers looked small in that room, but they filled it. These documents establish 3 facts, he said, counting on his fingers. 1. The boundary of McNeil land was set with iron pins in 1964 and recorded. 2. The berm in question is part of a county drainage agreement. It keeps the creek from making a liar out of your basements. 3. When the subdivision was platted in 1997, an exception was recorded that excluded this parcel and berm from HOA common area. The manager leaned over the papers, then looked up. Where did you get these? Right where they live, Grandpa said. The clerk's office and my house. A murmur ran through the room. You could feel folks shifting like wheat leaning toward rain. Karen tried to recover. Our consultant provided a revised plat last year. Grandpa nodded. And in that revision, they used a GIS overlay that misaligned the boundary. That happens when you let a computer guess at what a man measured with a chain and a steady eye. Worse, the letter you waved this morning cites a parcel ID across the creek. That's county property. I'm not here to embarrass you. I'm here to stop you from making an expensive mistake. The deputy from this morning stood near the back. He'd come in quietly, hat in hand. Now, he stepped forward. For what it's worth, he said, I saw the iron pins myself. They matched this survey. The room changed then. Not loudly. Just changed. People leaned in. The doubt drained off like dishwater. A hand went up Mrs. Lundy, who's lived here longer than almost anyone. I remember your daddy building that berm, she said to me. We brought iced tea. The creek kept flooding the lower lots until he figured it out. The board thanked him in the newsletter back when the newsletter was mimeographed. Karen's jaw worked. This doesn't change the unapproved barn extension. Grandpa smiled like a man who knows the punchline before it's told. Ma'am, that barn was framed in '72. You can still see the pencil marks from the lumber yard on the rafters. The addition you're calling new is the lean-to we re-roofed 2 summers ago after the hail. Maintenance isn't a structure change. Your own covenants say routine repairs don't require approval. The manager flipped through his binder, finding the clause. He swallowed. He's right, Kieran said, her jaw. We have a duty to maintain standards. So do we, I said, keeping my voice even. Our standard is telling the truth about what belongs to who. The room didn't need drama. It needed clarity. Grandpa gave it. He pulled one last item from the satchel, a faded envelope with my father's handwriting. He opened it carefully and slid out a letter, yellow as corn husk. My boy wrote this after we finished the berm, he said. Said, if you ever have to fight for this ground, do it with paper first. Paper and respect. The land will do the rest. Nobody breathed for a second. Then Grandpa turned to Karen, not unkind. Ma'am, you're in a position of trust. That's a heavy hat to wear. But you can take it off easy if you let pride do the thinking. The right thing now is simple. You withdraw your enforcement. You correct your map. You apologize to this family. Then you go down to the clerk's office and ask how to keep your records straight so you don't run over another neighbor. The manager cleared his throat. On behalf of the management company, I apologize for the documentation errors. We'll correct the overlay and update the binders. The board member beside Karen tugged his sleeve. We should vote, he whispered into the mic without meaning to. They did. It took 3 minutes. The motion passed. The enforcement was withdrawn. The records to be corrected, and the board to issue a formal apology to us and to the community for the confusion. Karen stared at the table. Then she looked up at me. I apologize, she said, each word heavy. It wasn't personal. Everything is personal when you knock on someone's porch, Grandpa said kindly. But you did the right thing now. There wasn't applause. Just the sound of folks exhaling. Relief moves quieter than anger. When we stepped outside, evening had come soft and pink over the pool. The flag on the community pole was lit, the way it ought to be. The deputy caught up to us in the parking lot. Mr. McNeil, he said to Grandpa, thank you for the lesson. Grandpa tipped his cap. Son papers the map, irons the truth, and memory's the compass. Use all 3. We drove home with the windows down. The cottonwoods rustled. Crickets tuned up. Our porch light glowed like a lantern on a trail you know by heart. I walked out to the flag and tightened the halyard. The line hummed. The stars came out one by one. The lake was calm again, and for the first time in years. So was I. Sometimes standing up for what's right means standing steady with the people who stood before you, paper in one hand, patience in the other. The loudest thing in a fight like this isn't your voice. It's the truth. laid down quiet and firm. Have you ever had to prove what was already yours? House? Land? Reputation? Tell me how it went in the comments. I read every one, and there's always someone here who needs to hear your story. If you believe some fights are worth having and worth winning the right way, hit subscribe. Let's stand up together for home, family, and the lines that truly matter.